A young man disappears after a night out. 2 days later, his body is pulled from a river, but his body tells pathologists a different story, a disturbing story. He did not drown. So how did Fidel Dennis of Fongo die, and who was with him in his final hours? A fifth-year aerospace engineering student, bright, focused, on the verge of a future he had worked for. He had just completed his attachment and was days away from returning to university. He was on the edge of becoming something, an engineer, probably a success story. Instead, tonight, he becomes an episode here on Murder Tapes. And on this episode of Murder Tapes, we reconstruct Fidel's final hours. We follow his last known movements, review CCTV footage, and confront the most critical question of the night, the question of who failed Fidel. I'm Brian Obuya, and this is not just another murder story on a TV near you. This is Murder Tips, where the truth is buried in the evidence. Last seen at 3 a.m. And so it begins. Yagon. Fidel was the fifth born in a family that had watched him grow through Nyamburi Primary, then Chulaimbo Secondary, where he performed strongly enough to earn admission into Kenyatta University for aerospace engineering. A demanding course he was already nearing completion of, having finished his attachment and practicum and standing only months away from graduation.
I must say that I was a very disciplined boy, very hardworking, very visionary, and very focused.
By January 2025, his path was moving away from possibility to completion. And for his family, the expectation was simple. He would finish, graduate, and begin his professional life as the newest engineer in town. But that, as you would soon see, would never be. Now, Hollow Market in Seme moves with a rhythm that feels both familiar and unbroken, where traders call out to passing customers. Motorbikes weave through narrow paths, and small businesses carry on with the quiet certainty of routine. Each person absorbed in the ordinary business of the day. And it is within this setting that Fidel's meeting with his friends was meant to take place. Just another casual stop in a place where people gather, talk, and move on with their lives without consequence. Yet beneath that normalcy, and unknown to him, something else appears to have been set in motion, a sequence of decisions and actions that would slowly pull that ordinary catch-up away from the safety of routine and into something far more serious. Something that would interrupt the flow of that evening and ultimately turn it into a chain of events that could not be undone. It was all happening on the 11th of January, 2025. A Saturday it was. Fidel was expected to return to university, but he postponed his travel to the following day, a decision that would later become one of the earliest points of reflection in this investigation.
I do not understand why
That evening,
it happened.
his father, Mr. Edward, a teacher by profession, also known by his other name as Mr. Luke, saw Fidel briefly with Kevin Otieno, who is a boda rider, and Eric Nambani, a friend of Fidel's working for a neighbor as a gardener. And although there was no tension or alarm at the time, it would be the last calm interaction before the night began to unfold in ways that no one could anticipate.
I met him together with two people. He alighted and we agreed, we talked. And we agreed with him that he would not stay at Kombewa where they were going. We waited for him because we were supposed to have a family meeting before we allow him to go back to school. He did not turn up. We waited up to around 9:30.
The last time I saw him was on a Saturday evening, and he told me he was going to a friend's place not far from here. So it was around 5 to 6. So at night I didn't see him coming, but I didn't take it that serious because the boys, they work, come home late. So on Saturday we went to sleep. Fidel was not around.
By nightfall, Fidel had not left. And as time passed, Edward even made a decision to send him upkeep money. As he says, it was a reassurance that there was no one standing in his way.
We waited up to around 9:30 because I was still holding his money for upkeep. Around that time, I decided to send 25,000 to his phone number, just to assure him that we are not holding him back in any way. We are ready to release his upkeep money.
But after that moment, communication begins to break down. And by the next morning, Fidel's phone is no longer reachable. At first, the assumption is simple, that he has left for school. But when his belongings remain at home and attempts to reach him fail, concern begins to replace that assumption.
We go to church. So on Sunday morning, I woke up very early. I was covering the wall here. And then I had a motorbike leave the compound. Now I thought maybe he had left. Unfortunately, it's like he did not leave. So from what I was doing, I went straight to the bathroom. I bathed and then I went to church.
So after church, my mom asked me if I knew where he was because he didn't take supper. During breakfast, he wasn't there. He wasn't in church. So my mom told me to call his number. So I called his number. The phone was ringing. It wasn't being picked. I called for the second time. It wasn't being picked. So I decided to call the friend that Fidel had told me on Saturday evening that he would go to him. And the friend told me that they were with Fidel in Kombewa. And a cousin of ours called Kevin Otieno had left with him to see their brother in Holo that had claimed that his motorbike had been broken down. So he told me the last time he had seen Fidel was Kevin Otieno having him on his bike to Holo. So after referring me to Kevin Otieno, of course I had his number, I decided to call him. I called Kevin. He picked the call and asked him where Fidel was because I'd been told he was the one with him. He told me to wait for some 10 minutes, then he'll call me back. So he hung the phone.
So he didn't answer the question?
He didn't answer. He just told me, kata simu na kupigia. Before I could hang up, he had already hung up. So I waited for the 10 minutes. He didn't call. So I decided to call him again. The next time I was calling, he just hung up the phone. So I told my mom that Fidel's phone is ringing it is not being picked. And I've called Kevin that I'd been told that he was with Fidel. Kevin is now hanging up the call, is not even picking. So I told my mom that let me call Kevin, maybe he can hear you, can get to talk to you. So I called Kevin for the third time. He picked the call, heard my mom saying hello, hung up the call.
Now on coming back, I again went for a meeting. Now in the evening, when I came back, I'd been trying his phone, but it was not going through. So I decided to come back. But as I was entering the compound, I met his brother. And I inquired from the brother because he's the one who had promised to take him to Kisumu, drive him to Kisumu. He told me that he had not seen him. He went to check, he had gone to check on him and found his laptop together with his bag on the bed. At that point, I got worried.
And by evening, Edward began calling those who were last seen with him. Through phone calls, Fidel's father begins to piece together a fragmented route from Kombewa, Holo to Kisumu town, and each of those locations adding movement but just not clarity.
I tried Kevin Otieno's number. I called him 3 times. He did not pick my call. And then I turned to Eric Nambani. Now when I called Eric, Eric picked and told me as they were coming back in the evening, that previous day, as they were coming back, when they were just about to branch, leaving the main road, Otieno received a call. Kevin Otieno received a call, and the call was from his brother, George Odhiambo Outa. And George had told him, had inquired who he was with, and then he told George that he was with Kevin, he was with Eric and Fidel. And he gave an instruction that Eric be taken, be dropped home so that they could go with Fidel. So they dropped Eric and went with Fidel to Holo, to a pub called Rooftop. So the story ended. Now Eric had told me where he was. I called again. I called Otieno. Otieno did not pick. But now when I called Jojo Outa, I called him thrice. The third time he picked. I asked him where Fidel was. He told me they were together at Holo. Then later on they were joined by Nelson Odoyo and his wife Tinka Odoyo and another friend of theirs called Mark. Then Odoyo told them that that was not the right place for them to be, that they moved to another place.
The group was at this entertainment joint that has since been renamed to JJ Lounge. It is here where arguably Nelson Odoyo believed was not good enough for the night. And at this stage, the story shifts from a missing person to a night whose final moments are still being defined by conflicting accounts. Late that Monday night, the cousins arrived at Edward's home carrying Fidel's belongings. The claim was casual. The claim was that Fidel had given them the items before disappearing.
That is what he told me. Then I asked him, if you went with him, then what happened? Because he's not here, but you are back. He told me that Fidel left them in the pub. That is the story that I got from him, that Fidel had left them in the pub, but they didn't know where he was going. From there, I got a little bit agitated. I told him, please kindly look for that boy and bring him home. That was now Sunday evening. The following day I went to work, but on coming back, I called my daughter here, and my daughter told me Fidel had not been seen. So I decided to go, not to come home, but to go to the police station, Komba police station, to do a report. I reported and I insisted that they put him as one of the missing persons in the police radar. Around 11 p.m. that night, Monday, George called me. I was seated in my house. George called me and told me that they were at the gate and had something to share with me. I went and opened the gate for them. They came in and told me that going by my instruction, they went looking for Fidel. They went police stations, they checked police stations in Kisumu. They did not find him booked anywhere. They went to the hospitals around. He was not booked anywhere. They checked on the mortuaries registries. He was not booked anywhere. But now when they were about to leave, they had two items that belonged to Fidel. One was his wristwatch. The other one was his phone. I asked them where they got those things. They told me Fidel gave them those things. And I told them, please, kindly, if you have these things, take them to the police and explain yourselves, because I have already made a report about the missing of Fidel. So they went back with those items, the two items, his watch and his phone.
They were with him up to the last moment. Now, when they were coming back, they came back without him. Now, our question is, when we were bordering their vehicle, coming back, where did they left? Where did they leave our son?
But for a missing person whose whereabouts remained unknown, the presence of personal items without proper explanation only deepened suspicion. The following day, police contacted Edward to inform him that a body had been recovered from River Nyamasaria, and at the mortuary, he identified his son.
At that point, they told me that they had retrieved a body from River Nyamasaria, and the description that I had given matched what they had also got from the boys from the deceased pocket. Because in his pocket there was his student identity card, there was his bank card, and there was also his national ID. So I went, they told me to go to Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Teaching and Referral Hospital because that is where they had taken the body.
My dad happened to be in a meeting in Maseno, so I called him to ask him if he had any news about Fidel. He told me he had not heard of any. Something around 10 to 20 minutes. I was actually shocked because the villagers had already started coming home, wailing. At this time, I had not known anything about Fidel being found in water or anything. They came home, started wailing.
But what complicates the case further is that the same individuals last seen with Fidel are also linked to the movement of the body, introducing immediate questions about proximity, timing, and responsibility.
Approaching Kisumu, a cousin of mine called Elias Luayo Odhiambo called me to find out where I was. I told him we were now approaching the flyover, about a kilometer or so away from the mortuary. We went straight to the mortuary. When I reached there, I met Elias Luayo Odhiambo and one girl whom I didn't know, but later on I came to know, who was the mortuary superintendent. She happened to have been one of my students. I had taught her some times back, about 15 years back. Then She took me to where the body was. I identified my son. After I got out of the morgue, she told me that this body was brought by some people. The police were here, and some 2 gentlemen were also with the body. They were in a black car. I inquired from Elias Luayo who those people were because they were not there. Luayo told me the 2 were Nelson Odoyo and Jojo Dhiambo Outa. I asked Luayo why they had left. Luayo did not tell me anything. He just kept quiet.
So having known that already he had passed and he was retrieved from River Nyamasaria, it kind of traumatized me in a way, because how could a cousin of ours take him somewhere, he goes missing, and then the next thing we hear is that he's being retrieved from water, dead, not alive, and the same cousin could not just talk to me straight and tell me we had Fidel and this happened.
As the pieces of Fidel's final night begin to come together, what emerges is a widening gap between what is being said and what the evidence appears to show. And that raises a difficult question about responsibility, about those last moments outside the club, and about what happened in the hours no one has fully accounted for. And when we return, we take a closer look at the footage that could hold the answers and the contradictions that continue to stand in the way of the truth. CCTV footage from Black Pearl Lounge, Kisumu's jewel of entertainment, chaos, and drama, then became the most critical piece of evidence, showing Fidel arriving with a group of 6 people just before midnight, entering the premises in what appears to be a normal social interaction. Cameras clearly show the motor vehicle KDP 768G snaking into the club's parking, carrying a group of about 6 friends who, at that point, appear ready to continue with their night. Their arrival unremarkable, their movements blending into the rhythm of a busy club evening. And for the next hour, everything suggests a normal social outing until just before 1 a.m. when the first signs of disruption begin to emerge. At 0049 hours, exactly an hour after they arrive, George Outa is seen walking out of the club, and with him is Fidel Dennis of Wongo. And shortly after, Nelson Odoyo joins them outside, where their movement suggests they are trying to manage Fidel, who appears visibly intoxicated and increasingly unsteady, as they guide him toward the vehicle in what seems, at least initially, like an attempt to contain the situation. But at 0056 hours, Fidel steps out of the car and begins walking back toward the entrance of the club, only to be restrained from re-entering. And moments later, as he turns back towards the parking area, he appears disoriented, approaching the wrong vehicle and attempting to open it. A detail that speaks to his condition at the time and raises early questions about his vulnerability in that moment. Let's jump over to 0109 hours. Nelson Odoyo, the guy in dreads, is seen leading Fidel back into the club. briefly restoring a sense of control. But that moment is short-lived because within just 6 minutes, Kevin Otieno emerges again, this time with Fidel, followed closely by George and Nelson. And it is here that the situation begins to escalate more visibly, as Fidel, now clearly intoxicated and struggling to maintain balance, is met with aggression. George Outa is seen striking him forcefully and repeatedly while the group moves through the parking area, and at points where the camera's view becomes partially obstructed, there are indications that the physical confrontation continues beyond what is clearly captured, suggesting that what is visible may only be part of what actually took place. Despite this, Fidel continues to move, at times staggering across the parking lot, appearing disoriented yet persistent, as though trying to navigate his way through a situation he no longer fully understands. But the environment around him offers little relief, because at one point, a male guard is seen pushing him to the ground, and shortly after, a chef joins in, striking him several times before another individual enters the frame at a darker section of the lot, further compounding the violence. By 0150 hours, Fidel is directed toward the gate and made to leave the premises, walking out into the darkness beyond the club alone and without any visible assistance. Nearly an hour later, at around 0238 hours, members of the same group are seen outside again, moving through the area as though searching for Fidel. But when they do not find him, they return to the club, like nothing happened. And by 3:10 a.m., the same vehicle that brought them there drives out of Black Pearl, leaving without Fidel Dennis Ofongo. And from that moment on, he is no longer seen alive. Now, there is little dispute about certain facts in this case, because the footage leaves no doubt that Fidel was intoxicated, and by all visible indications, heavily so, just as there is equally little doubt that the people he was with that night, having brought him there and remained in his company, bore responsibility for his safety in that condition. A duty of care that becomes harder to ignore as the events unfold. It is also not contested by the medical findings that Fidel did not die from drowning, even though a river is flowing right outside Black Pearl. It may suggest that Fidel just fell into the water and drowned, but the medical reports tell a different story. Meaning that by the time his body entered the water, life had already left him. And further still, it is a matter on record that Nelson Odoyo and George Odhiambo Outa were aware of the whereabouts of his body before his own father received that information. It is a sequence that raises its own troubling implications. And so, when all these points are placed side by side, one central question remains, unavoidable as is unresolved. So, could the blows, the kicks, and the handling captured that night, both from those he was with and from individuals at Black Pearl, have played a direct role in the murder of Fidel Dennis Ofongo? Science says yes.
Asphyxia is mainly lack of oxygen, especially in the scene. Yeah, so it's more like your brain doesn't get enough oxygen to work, and it's one of the things that is needed for the brain to work.
Maybe some of the circumstances under which I could die of asphyxia.
The most common one, okay, there are two common ones. There is the birth asphyxia, where the child does not get enough oxygen at birth going to the brain. There's a common one in our institution. And then the other common one in the criminal world is strangulation. Yeah.
But your patient had no aspect of strangulation.
No, the neck was okay. There was no obvious sign of strangulation. Yeah. But there are also some maybe, like you find like for him the chest had collapsed, meaning the oxygen was not going to go to the brain. So that can also be caused by trauma, like I hit you, or you get an accident, one side of your chest collapses, there's not enough oxygen going to your brain, then you get that asphyxia.
We reached out to both George Odhiambo Outa and Nelson Odoyo, seeking their response to questions surrounding the events of that night, including the circumstances under which Fidel Dennis of Fongo was left behind at Black Pearl, and the broader allegations that have since emerged from both the footage and the family's account. But by the time of going on air, neither of them had responded to our requests for comment. The footage, as described by Edward, shows a sequence where Fidel is later seen being removed from the premises, physically handled and prevented from re-entering, while the rest of the group eventually leaves without him at around 4 a.m. Let's stay here for a minute more. You see, the footage does more than show movement. This footage is raising a difficult question about care and responsibility, because it captures Fidel being removed from the club, physically handled and prevented from re-entering, after which he's left outside while those he arrived with continue with their night. And eventually, at around 4 a.m., they get back into the same motor vehicle and drive away without him. And when you consider that these were the very people who had transported him roughly 25 kilometers from his home in Seme, the decision to leave him behind in an unfamiliar environment in the early hours of the morning without ensuring his safety or even accounting for his condition begins to look less like a casual separation and more like a moment of possible negligence, one that sits at the center of the unanswered question. At what point did responsibility end? And who decided it no longer mattered where Fidel was? Remember, these were people with his mobile phone, and so he had no way of reaching out to anyone. Probably had no way of paying for transport back home.
They said after Fidel started causing commotion, he actually took his phone, yes, and his watch and gave them. Personally, Fidel gave them the phone and the watch. So he was taken outside to sit there, and he got lost. They looked for him, they didn't find him. And they didn't say about the time they left there, but eventually they came home without Fidel, but with the phone and the watch.
So if Fidel Dennis walked out of the Black Pearl, his options were painfully few. He could veer left, skirting the perimeter of the entertainment joint, or he could turn right and merge to the main road, or he could take the extreme left, edging dangerously next to the river. But why would he take that route when he came 40 kilometers away from Seme? As the investigation turned to the most critical piece of evidence, the CCTV footage from Black Pearl, another question began to surface, one that no one seemed willing to answer directly. Where is the rest of the footage? In an effort to verify what had been collected, Murder Tapes visited Kasagam police station seeking clarity on whether investigators had obtained recordings from all available cameras at the club. But instead of answers, our team was detained, asked to record statements on the reason we visited, and questioned for nearly 2 hours, yet leaving without a single clear response to the one issue that mattered. Had police secured the full surveillance record from that night? Well, back at Black Pearl itself, management maintained that they had fully cooperated and had handed over footage from multiple camera angles to authorities. This raised a troubling possibility that what the family and investigators have seen may not represent the complete picture, and that somewhere within those missing frames could lie the moments that finally explain what happened to Fidel Dennis Ofwongo.
The DCIO, the sub-county DCIO started telling me the stories that I had heard from George's statement. Then I asked him a very funny question. That, did you also go to the scene of crime? And he told me I'm the boss. Then I stopped at that point. But I insisted that I would also love to see the same clip that they had seen. We went with them, though they were a little bit reluctant at first, but eventually we went to Nyamasari, to Black Pearl. The team at Nyamasari was a little bit uncooperative, but eventually they allowed us to watch the clip from camera 7.
Now, in the days that followed Fidel's murder, grief within the family and the surrounding community began to spill over into tension and accusation. The village down in Malela was hearing none of it, culminating in a tragedy where a house linked to individuals connected to the case had been set on fire. An incident that led to the arrest of 7 people, among them Fidel's 22-year-old sister Valentine, who at the time was caring for a 4-month-old baby and who would soon find herself behind bars at Kodiaga prison as investigators pursued the allegation. It's understandable that you guys had lost your brother, you were in mourning, and you suspected that these people had done it. But did you have to burn down their houses?
I actually don't understand what criteria they used to associate me in burning the house, because there was someone at the DCI offices that I was involved in touching a house, which I didn't know about. Actually, the days they were saying that the house was touched, I wasn't actually at home. I was at my sister's place because my kid was a bit disturbed with the kind of commotion was here, the wailing, and so I decided to go to my sister's place and came on Saturday, on the day of the burial. So I'm told all this happened on the 7th and I wasn't even around. So out of good heart, I decided to just go to the DCI and see what next. But it ended somewhere. It ended to some greater point that I didn't imagine it would. So when we appeared before the magistrate and tukasomewa the charges and of course denied, we were given a bond of 200,000. Yeah, each person was given a bond of 200,000. So because that could not be processed at the moment, I was taken, me together with the rest, we were taken to Kodiaga. Of course, me to the Kisumu Women's Prison with my baby.
Yet, even as these arrests were made, questions lingered about the integrity of the process, particularly because the DCI did not visit the alleged scene of arson to independently verify that what had happened is what was reported, leaving the case resting largely on uncorroborated claims.
According to, because among the people who were arrested, I was among those people. I was arrested together with my cousin Valentine. The charge sheet were given. The census stated that 3 houses were burned there. But right now, even if you go to that home, it is not far from this place. It is only 1 house got burnt. The 2 are still there and standing. Yes. Yeah.
And it's never been known who burnt them down.
No, you never known, because that day we were very busy. We were attending to our visitors. Like me, I didn't go to mortuary. I was at home looking after our visitors here. Yes.
And as weeks turned into months, the prosecution struggled to sustain the charges against Tobias Otieno Oluoch, Michael Otieno Oyoko alias Bobby Oyoko, Edwin Ocheng Nyariro, Michael Ocheng Osodo, Joseph Okech Odari, Nashon Otieno Ofongo, and Valentine Atieno Ofongo, eventually allowing the case to collapse.
The next time we were in court, I just heard the prosecutor saying, I don't know, we were to be dropped because the statements of the witnesses, I don't know, did not mention our name, that we had nothing to do with that, and it was dropped.
But not before Valentine had endured the emotional and physical toll of incarceration, her infant becoming one among the youngest humans to stay in a prison wall, caught in the widening fallout of a case that, at its core, was still searching for answers.
Life wasn't that nice, mostly because of my baby. It really affected her. And with it affecting her, it also affected me, because the environment alone was traumatizing. The baby could not eat because the food served there, I think, were not just good for a baby. But we survived. I was strong inside there for the time I was there.
So did you ever imagine yourself spending time in a prison?
Actually, I had never imagined of me getting there, because I could not see any reason as to why I could one day end up there, because if it's a matter of kukosea watu, I think I live a very private life.
Forgiveness in the aftermath of Fidel's death has not come easily, because for Edward Ofongo, the loss of his son did not end at the mortuary, but seemed to follow the family into the days that came after, shaping how he interprets everything that unfolded, including the arrest of his daughter and other relatives, which he believes was not a separate incident, but one that was instigated by the very individuals he holds responsible for the events that led to his son's death. And in that belief lies a fracture that continues to divide the two families, making reconciliation difficult. And leaving behind a sense that justice for him has yet to fully take its course.
All along, we had never had any issues. But for now, I cannot say, okay, much as you may want to forgive, actually, we had forgiven them until they came up and arrested my daughter, arrested my nephew, arrested some of the boys here. Then I gave it a second thought, that much as we want peace, for them they are not for that peace.
Mr. Luke Edward is speaking on the strength of this message he received from Nelson Odoyo. The message clearly warns him of unspecified consequences when he says he will not sit back.
For now, I'm only appealing that my son, Fidel, be given justice, hata kama ni posthumously.
I met up with Dr. Otieno at the Kisumu People's Park one Sunday afternoon. I had just read his post-mortem report, and quite dumbfounded by the findings, I had to hear it from himself. The post-mortem examination concludes that Fidel did not die by drowning, but from asphyxia, with physical injuries consistent with the restricted breathing and trauma, placing the moment of death outside the waters of River Nyamasaria itself and raising even more difficult questions about what happened before he was found.
The history that we got, the history was he had drowned and they found the body after 3 days. That was, I think, the 4th day in mortuary. So that was around 7 days. So for drowning, obvious case, like what we were expecting was maybe swollen mouth, water in the chest and the intestines a bit, and maybe the scrotum. So that was what we expected. So when we went in, there are some things that are not adding up. An example was the chest. One chest had collapsed, the other chest was normal. It was dry.
There's the lung guns.
Yeah, that's the test. The lung, one side had collapsed, one side was okay. The trachea was dry, there was no sign of fluids. The digestive system was also dry, there was no sign of water. The scrotum was okay, was normal. And though we did find those changes for somebody that had been in water for 3 days, like the skin that was shrunk. And I think also the mouth was also a bit swollen. Yeah. There was also some bruising all over the body. That was not an explanation for being in water. Yeah. So those are our findings. So when we saw it, we didn't conclude that it was drowning because of the things that we saw. Our conclusion was asphyxia because the brain was also our findings from the brain also suggested asphyxia.
The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has since opened an inquest into the death of Fidel Dennis of Wonga, a legal process intended to establish the facts surrounding his death and determine whether any individual bears criminal responsibility. But for the family, that step has done little to restore confidence.
Everything is based on their statement. The ODPP report is based on their statement. Because if you look at the statement that they made, matches everything about what the ODPP said. Because I watched the video, the clip, and at no given time did they take him there. At no given time did they take him there. He never entered into any of those vehicles. He was just going round at the parking. But to me, if he did watch the clip, he could not have made that lie.
Inquests in this country have too often stretched on without resolution or quietly faded without accountability. And as a result, what is presented as a path to truth feels to them like a procedural formality rather than a genuine pursuit of justice. And having watched the case unfold with what they describe as gaps, contradictions, and missed opportunities, they now fear that the inquest may ultimately serve not to uncover what truly happened, but to close the chapter on a son they had invested so much in, without ever fully answering the questions that continue to define his death.
So it is like somebody saying a semi-permanent house is more valuable than the life of an aerospace engineering student. A boy we had spent so much. Brother, you can look around. My house that I wanted to build has stalled because I wanted to clear. By the time Fidel died, he did not have any FRS. I had paid everything. We were only waiting. I took even a loan to make sure that I cleared everything. You know how much it is or how much it costs to take a student, especially one who is doing an engineering course. We had made a lot of sacrifices, but for now, we cannot. Because some people, for reasons that we don't understand, decided to cut his life short, to cut his dreams short. It pains us so much that the people whom we suspect know something about the death of Fidel are still boasting around. They are going around here boasting, bragging that they are highly moneyed, that they have a lot of money and nothing can happen to them. They are bragging around here, everywhere.
At his final resting place, the ground lies still, cemented and flattened, marking a quiet permanence that stands in stark contrast to the life that once moved with purpose and promise. And here, beneath that unbroken surface, rests a young man whose journey had barely begun to unfold, now reduced to memory, to a name, to some absence of sorts, and an episode here on Murder Tapes. And for those who come to stand there, it is not just a grave they see, but the weight of what was lost, the plans that were never completed, the future that never arrived, and the lingering questions that refuse to be buried alongside the engineering student. Leaving this place not just as a site of rest, but as a constant show of a life that was interrupted, a story that even in death has not yet found its ending.
The death of Fidel has caused a lot of problems. First, the family has been traumatized. Me, to be precise, since January, I don't live a peaceful life. Because my parents are always, they're stressed up, looking for, finding ways to clear the court issues. The death of Fidel also, him lying there, dead, cannot stand up and speak the truth about what happened. Every day trying to connect things two and two, and they don't add up. Secondly, his death has cost me my education. I was to join campus, but I could not join at the moment because I was still nursing my baby. So this year, I had prepared to join campus, but I could not because the family is not financially stable. We've used a lot of money on these court issues. So I'll have to wait for some time before I join university. Because of my brother. Going missing in the hands of people we don't, the people we call our relatives.
Grudge. Fidel was a very polite boy who never quarreled and never fought anybody. So this is one thing that at ICC we got shocked. But all in all, it happened. But up to now, I believe there is something that they know that they are yet to tell us about Fidel's death.
Now, if they do not kill Fidel, then it is upon the police to produce for us and tell us who killed the Fidel. If it was not them, who killed him?
Now, standing here today, what stays with me is not just how Fidel Dennis of Fongo died, but how much of his story is still left unresolved. Because we have a young man with a clear future, a night that began ordinarily and ended in murder. Footage that raises serious questions about what happened in those final hours. A body found in a river, but a post-mortem examination that points elsewhere. And a family back in Seme that continues to search for answers in the middle of contradictions, delays, and alleged compromise. And while an inquest is now underway, for those who knew him, this is not just about the process. It's about truth, accountability, and the hope that one day, the gap between what is known and what is being said will finally close. And when it does, that it will bring with it not just closure, but justice. Thanks for watching. Good evening.